listening to the Walk the Line podcast. Real stories of real people.
So here we are again. David, how you doing? Nice to have you on.
I'm doing really well, and I'm thrilled to be here. I really appreciate it.
I know do you know what? I was looking forward to this episode. I've been itching. I've been dying to have a chat with you because when obviously you got in touch regarding obviously the story and obviously the book you wrote and all that sort of stuff, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. That's right up my street. Because it's such a great story and it's such a great experience to have, really, isn't it? And I'm not going to lie to you, it's a bit of a crazy thing to do. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, for people who are like kind of listening, they don't understand about the ins and outs of what you've done back in the day. I think was it 90s, was it? Back in like 93, was it? Yeah. 91. So David decided, one day, decided to kind of get up and spend as a year in North Canada, was it?
Yeah, in northern Manitoba. So we were about 120 miles south of Churchill, Manitoba, just to give some frame of reference there. And Churchill is known as the polar bear capital of the world. That in and of itself, that town is just it's full of very unique people. It's like a town of 1,000 people. The only way to get there is by train or plane. And so we were about 120 miles south of that. And that for us was the nearest town.
It must be like the coldest place in the world. Because I remember reading your book, you said it was getting down to minus 40.
Yeah, it can get really, really cold up there. It's we saw some temperatures that even pushed beyond that. But and oddly enough, our coldest night, I think, was our very first night out. So it just figures
because
how it works.
You kind of, as soon as you landed, really, wasn't it? I mean, the description you wrote in the book, and obviously I'll give everyone, obviously, as we've got links and that sort of stuff too, and all that sort of thing for, I think you've got on Kindle, is that correct?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
We'll give some links to that so you can take a look at it, and it gives a really good description of whereabouts you are, and sure. I think what I really enjoyed the start of the book, you really set the tone pretty well about the experience of actually flying there first of all, and I think you called it a tin can sort of thing with the plane that you were in, and then landing there, and it was straight off the bat. You were literally in the shit straight away, weren't you? It was just like craziness.
Well, the thing is, so just to kind of give the quick 5-minute kind of rundown. The overall goal of this was to live for 1 year in a cabin that was completely cut off. So there was no means of communication. There was no, once that plane drops you off, you're there. So if you've forgotten anything, kind of screwed. You better have your details in order. And I was going in with a trip partner of mine, and we made the decision to fly in for this trip in January because the only way really to get there is you end up landing on this small lake that's about 3 miles away. And we brought in about 2,000 pounds worth of food and equipment and supplies and things like that. And really the easiest way to get those to the cabin is by sled. Kind of traversing this country in the summer it's essentially a muskeg swamp. And so walking on a muskeg is a bit like trying to walk on a waterbed. It's vegetation on top of water. So you just don't know. Sometimes you'll punch through. So it's a really odd experience. And carrying a heavy pack, that makes the work all that much more difficult. So the goal was to land, to sled at least enough food and equipment for, the first couple of days, so that we could kind of get everything established and then go back to the lake and start shuttling gear back and forth. That was the goal. And we estimated the hike would, the hike would take maybe 3 hours, maybe 4 at the most, just based on past experience from other people who have gone to this place and spent some time.
So you had you mentioned as well the supplies that you had. So you're obviously the initial first, it's supposed to be 3 hours, but we'll go into that instead a bit. But the supplies, you were taking enough for yourself for that 3 days sort of thing. I mean, how much were you actually taking as a whole? Did you have to take like a year's worth of gear, or did you have to?
That's a great question. So we brought in about, like I said, we brought in about 2,000 pounds worth of food and equipment. I don't know how those numbers break out for each kind of category, but the food that we brought was mostly like staples. So it was like flour, salt, sugar, and then a bunch of freeze-dried food, and then non-perishable food and things like that. And then any fresh protein would be supplemented by hunting and fishing.
Right.
So that our food cache that we brought in was going to last us for about the first 4 months. After which the owner of the cabin, a gentleman by the name of William Forgy, Dr. Forgy, or Doc, as everyone calls him, he was then going to fly in our next 4 months worth of provisions. So we had 2 different drops kind of scheduled with him to bring us more additional food, and also to bring us news of what's going on outside. And it's a very odd thing to be, we're so connected. It's almost hard to even imagine what it's like to be that disconnected.
Did you have to, with the food and the rations? I'll call it the rations because that's basically what it is. Did you have to really kind of be very strict in what you can take and what you couldn't? Because I can imagine you're going to have to look at like nutritional value and what's going to keep you going and all that. So how long did that take?
Well, most of it really, it wasn't necessarily, we weren't overly concerned with nutritional value because frankly, up there, it's probably one of the greatest diet plans in the world, because you could just eat anything you want. You're going to burn it off.
Yeah.
So we weren't overly concerned with like nutritional value. The biggest concern was, will this stay fresh, or will this, and that, so like, again, going in the summer, you're really not bringing in any sort of meat or anything like, because you just can't, so you gotta hunt for that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean that's the thing is, to be fair, I'm always the one. My diet is horrible, so if I had to do something like that, I would be bringing in like kind of, I don't know, like cans of crisps, Pringles.
Oh yeah, sure.
All the cool stuff, and then just sit there and snack. I'll probably go through about 4 months of snacks in about a day or 2 days, and then go shit.
The big commodity for us was chocolate. So like, so we'd bring in these big blocks of chocolate, like big, that you buy for like baking, but it's sweetened chocolate. And you could, those, each individual piece of that came wrapped, and each one was about an ounce of chocolate. And so, we would knock it off. And then when we finally got down to like that last piece of chocolate, which we managed to keep it going for most of the year. So we brought in a lot of chocolate. But that last piece, man, that was a really sad day to see that last go. And it was almost ceremonial, the way that we kind of shared that, broke that thing apart and ate it and savored it. So
with the stuff that you left behind, because you said you had to take some stuff and leave some stuff where you dropped. Was it not concerned, like obviously, excuse me, my naivety, with animals, would they not attract it, or was it that cold? There wasn't any animals about.
It's definitely a concern. I mean, it's because we were leaving it for such a brief period of time, and because most of it really was something it didn't have much of a scent. It really wouldn't attract much. Now, if something found it and managed to get into it, it would go in town. But most of it was because it was non-perishable, etc. We weren't too concerned with that. So yeah.
Oh, well, not be funny, but if a wolf found it and actually got into it, he deserves it, because that's good effort to him, If he gets into like a tin of beans or a tin of anything, he gets, you can have that, mate. You deserve it. Well done. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. So you kind of dropped down with all your gear, and you, as I say, you explained it really well in the book. You said to the first cabin, the cabin you went to, it was a 3-hour hike. It didn't really last 3 hours, did it?
Yeah, it didn't quite work out that way. So we flew, to give you an idea, it might be tricky for my friends over the pond to grasp, but just to give you an idea, we drove 15 hours from Chicagoland to Winnipeg, Canada.
Yeah.
And then from Winnipeg, we took a train for about a day and a half up to Thompson, Manitoba. And then from there, we flew for an hour and a half to get to the cabin.
Jesus.
So that gives you an idea of just how far out you are. And when you're flying there, you don't see another, like, there's no sign of civilization for that entire flight. You're just in the middle of nowhere. And when we flew over the cabin just to get at least from the air to make sure that, like, the roof looked like it was intact and everything, looked structurally sound. And yeah, so we land at this lake, and also keep in mind that morning, breakfast was almost, we almost didn't even exist because your nerves are just, firing off. So you just want to get out there. When we get to the airport, the first thing I noticed was there was a group of men around the plane that we were flying in. The plane is on skis, so it can land on frozen lakes. And they've got a portable heater aimed at one of the wheels, one of the front landing gear, to ensure that the hydraulics on these skis are, stay fluid and actually work. And so, and the pilot told us, he said, we had to wait before we could take off. He said, we've got to wait for it to warm up to, 30 below before we'll fly. So, and that was Fahrenheit. So I'm not sure. I can't remember what that was in Celsius, but so we had a little bit of a delay that morning. And when we landed at this lake, the pilot told us, he's like, you guys got like 10 minutes to get your crap out of my plane. And then I'm gone, because he turns his engines off and he doesn't want those to lock up, obviously. And so we very quickly threw all this gear out. He sat in he got back in his plane and he looked at us for a long time. These two dumb American kids standing on the side of this frozen lake. And it was almost as though he never said anything, but it was almost as though he was giving us an out, like, hey, you sure you want to do this? Because he knows what that country is like.
I can imagine, yeah.
And so we just waved to him and he shut the door and off he went. And this was one of these really powerful moments, because we stood there and watched the plane until we couldn't see it anymore. And then we continued to stand there and listen until we couldn't hear it anymore. And then you hear this silence. And that sounds like an odd thing to say, but it really was something you could feel almost. We're so used to sound that when you're in an environment that is that quiet, it's almost distracting, And so now our job is to load up the sleds with, again, enough gear or enough, provisions to kind of keep us, for the next couple days so we could get things straightened away, and put our snowshoes on because the snow is so deep, and start heading into the trees. And this country is extremely flat. There's like no visual landmarks necessarily. Right. And it's very, the trees grow pretty close together. So the only way to navigate is with a compass. And we knew what the bearing was, the azimuth was. So we start in, and like the first 10 steps into the tree line, we both realized pretty quickly, this is going to be a real nightmare. Like, the snow was exceptionally deep. And the problem was the snowshoes, their job is to keep you floating on top of that snow. But instead, we were just punching through.
Is that just because of the snow, because of the density of the snow, because it's so big?
Right. Because it's so cold, the snow is more like powdered sugar. It doesn't pack. You can make a snowball, but you really have to hold it for a long time in order to get that to melt. Yeah. So it's just really granular. And when you'd step down with your snowshoes, the snow kind of around it would cave in and land on top of the snowshoes. So then you're picking up that weight with each step that you take. It was a nightmare right out of it. And so, but we finally kind of found a rhythm and started moving. And we were both getting pretty wiped out. 3 hours or so into the hike, we realized that even though we tried to insulate the water bottles that we had brought along, the water in there had frozen solid.
Wow, it's
And
frozen so quick as well. Yeah.
yeah. So now we're, when you're hiking and outputting that many calories, right, keeping yourself hydrated is clearly important. But that now is not really an option. And the food that we brought, really, it all required cooking, which we weren't concerned with because we thought, well, we'll be cooking once we get to this cabin.
Of course. Yeah.
And so we continued on. So now 4 hours have gone by. And finally, I hear my trip partner, Scott, say, oh, there it is. I can see the river just down the very shallow valley. And there was this kind of silver ribbon that was down there. And I remember what the owner of this cabin told me. He said, during this hike, he said, when you first see the river, you're about halfway.
So you've only went halfway. It's about 4 hours.
Yeah. So, and by now it's dark because, you're in there in the winter. So you're dealing with, 18 hours of darkness, 16 to 18 hours of darkness a day. But we planned this departure on a day when there was a full moon. So we were in pretty good shape there.
Yeah.
We continue hiking. We finally arrive at the river. We've now hiked 8 hours. We are exhausted. We're a little cranky because we thought we'd be there many hours earlier. But there's still a little gas in the tank. And so we start looking, and we thought, we've got to be like right on top of it. Because we know that the compass heading we took was really tight. And we start looking up and down the bank of the river. Nothing. We don't see anything. And another hour goes by, and then another hour goes by, and suddenly we realize, like, this is a problem. Like, this is a kind of a dire situation. We're in trouble here, big trouble.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep in mind too, we're 19 and 20 years old at the time. and part of that is really works to your advantage because you have that naivety of youth, right? You're invincible. Like
you think you're a superhero. Nothing's gonna. Yeah. You're 19. Don't care me.
And so that kind of stupidity, I think, works in your favor a little. Like if that happened to me today, I'd probably be like, I'm screwed. There's no way I'm dead because so much more now. And
yeah, of course.
So we realized we had to do something immediately. We did not bring a tent with us because we'd be standing in the cabin.
So you'd have to did you make like kind of a makeshift camp sort of thing? Did you have to kind of get some, I would say like fire and all that and camp out for the night?
We didn't even bother with the fire. We were so exhausted. We built a shelter that was made essentially, ideally in a situation like that, you would want to make a snow shelter would be ideal. Yeah. But again, you can't pack, the snow doesn't pack, or at least it won't pack within a reasonable amount of time. Up there, you'd have to let it really settle before you could dig it out. So we constructed the shelter out of pine boughs, and the shelter was hideous. It wouldn't have saved anyone. But I think mentally, the act of taking some action was really beneficial, because it's like, okay, well, we're doing it. We're doing something, here. And once we had the shelter constructed, we put sleeping pads down on the floor of this. We opened up one of our sleeping bags, and then we both climbed into the other sleeping bag that we had and pulled the open one around us. So spooning my trip partner was definitely not something that I had envisioned before this whole thing began.
It's ticked off the bucket list now, though.
Yeah. Check it out. And but we literally just kind of huddled in there to try to share whatever heat there was. By now, it's probably 45-ish below, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And just laid down to. And just hope that we would make it to the morning. We realized, I think, the severity of of this situation. We knew that it was touch and go. It could really go on either way.
Well, the thing I was going to ask actually, it's that cold, and this is coming from my experience. Obviously, I've never been in like -30 sort of thing temperatures, but obviously from Scotland, as you can tell, we get our fair share of cold temperatures up there. And one thing that I realize is if you're doing like sort of like a long hike or any sort of like activity a long period of time, you're all kitted out, you've got your gear on, but you do sweat.
Oh yeah.
So you do sweat, which is obviously the natural thing. But a lot of people don't understand that makes you wet, and then it also gets cold and all that sort of stuff. What was the situation with that? I mean, I've had it before, and it's only been like -10 or -5, and that was horrible. So
It's such a good question. It's such a good question. So when we started this hike, I'd never been in those temperatures either. I don't know what the hell 40 below is like. So I had every single piece of winter gear on that I brought with me. I had like a full face mask. I mean, the only thing you could see was maybe my eyes. I was just like all bundled up. And just a few steps into the trees, I'm starting to peel layers away.
Yeah.
To avoid that very thing, to avoid building up too much sweat. You've got to kind of vent that.
Got to do it, yeah.
And of course, Scott did the same. Now, when we built the shelter, I kept complaining about my feet. We wore mucklucks, which are, kind of an Eskimo moccasin, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And they're brilliant and wonderful things. And but my feet were just really hurting. And so I took my mucklucks off, and I kept trying to kind of, with my hand, kind of move my toes back and forth just to kind of keep circulation moving.
Keep the blood flowing, yeah.
And I kept asking Scott, I'm like, do your feet hurt? And he's like, no, they don't. Well, we'll get to this in a minute, but that cost him, and it does deal with that exact issue that you're talking about with perspiration buildup. Yeah. So we were in this shelter. Every 30 minutes or so, we're asking each other, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? And it was again, absolutely silent. The only thing that I remember, there's two things I remember hearing. One, some of the trees that were around us were popping from the cold. So the sap will expand. The trees will essentially.
Okay.
And also the sound of my breath when it hit the air, it sounded like when you spray a spray bottle, it hisses. It just hits.
Really?
Because your breath, it like crystallizes when it hits the air. So it was, one of all these really weird things that you learn in extreme cold,
What was that like psychologically? Because you mentioned the only reason that I bring this up is because one of my friends were talking about this the other day there, and we were talking about the room. I think it's NASA that built it. That it's got like, no sound.
Oh yeah, sure. I know exactly.
Yeah, you can only spend like 7 minutes in there. Otherwise, you basically go crazy, go insane. I mean, so being in that sort of scenario like yourself with all that sort of like different, and you talked about your breath and the quietness. I mean, how did that affect you?
It takes it. Well, at least for me, it took me a while to just kind of get used to that. It certainly was nowhere near as bad as the room, obviously, but that place, especially in winter when everything is insulated,
right?
I think I mentioned. I think I mentioned in the book that it was almost annoying. So I think I called it the deafening silence.
Yeah.
It just is that. It's so it takes time to get used to, for sure. So it was a bit odd. Yeah.
I just especially if you're coming from like any sort of civilization, even if you're in a town, you're still going to have noise. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. It could be obviously animals there. You'd have cars driving past, planes going across, whatever it is. And then just to be in that from like one day, and then tomorrow you're in a place just completely different. That must be such a massive change to you.
It's the same thing whether if you're going in or coming out. There's a period of time that I feel like you almost have to acclimatize. And when you're going into the wilderness, like and again, for me anyway, I find that back then, it took me at least a couple of weeks anytime I went in to just slow down to kind of the rhythm of your environment and just get used to that pace and that weirdness.
Yeah.
And same thing coming out. I mean, coming out, you're like white knuckled when you're screaming down the highway, you're like going, it's just, whoa, it's an overload of your senses. So it's definitely bizarre.
Yeah, so one extreme to the other, and then again going back, sort of thing. It's a crazy sort of scenario. So you the first night you guys were literally in trouble, and you mentioned that we're going there. I mean, how did you get any sleep that night? Did you just stay awake? Did you rest?
Just pockets of sleep. And so here again, we have barely had anything to eat that day, very little to drink. Clearly in quite a situation. But luckily, that following morning, the sun comes up, and it was a really motivational thing, even though it was still ridiculously cold.
Yeah.
We got the impression like, oh, look, it's like the sun, and we almost worshipped it, And
Did you start singing in the background? Because I can imagine in that scenario, it's all quiet, and then the sun comes up. All I can just imagine is like some sort of motivational speech coming with it. You've got like David Goggins saying something in the back of your head while the sun comes up. Who's going to carry the boats?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, we were still I think, in too much of a situation to do any celebrating.
Enjoy it.
Our goal was to let's find this damn thing. So
let's stay alive. Let's stay alive for one more night. Yeah.
So we look again for maybe another hour, and we realize like this is we need to regroup. And so we go back to the lake. Now, luckily, because we'd broken that snowshoe trail, we packed all that snow down. Our trip back was that 3.5 hours that we initially expected. So, luckily now the trail is at least broken and we can move over it quickly. We get back to the lake and decide to set up one of our tents that we have. This is an older canvas style tent, like an old wooden tent. And it came
a man's tent, isn't it? It's like what men do when they're out in the wilderness. None of this manly tent. None of this pop-up stuff with like insulation. Our man's tent. Yeah.
That's right. Right. The incandescent lighting. So we had a small kerosene stove that you could put in the tent, but we knew one of the pieces of that stovepipe, kind of an elbow piece, we knew that was at the cabin. But here again, like we weren't worried about it because we're not going to use this damn tent before the cabin. So we fashioned something out of aluminum foil because we're 19 and that's what you do. And we get the stove fired up, and all of a sudden, like you could just start to feel warmth, and we just put a pot of snow on the stove to melt for water. And right around the time it started turning into slush, I hear Scott, my partner, yell fire. And I look up, and sure enough, that the top of the tent had caught on fire because of this crazy stovepipe. Oh yeah. It's crazy. So Scott says he's like, I'll take care of the fire. You take care of the stove. So I essentially kind of put heavy gloves on and threw the entire stove out of the tent. I moved, of course, the slushy water off of the stove. And this whole process took seconds, right? But in that time, the slushy water was now ice, right? So once again, barely anything to drink, nothing really to eat that second day. And we've just output a tremendous amount of energy and so we're starting to feel the effects of this.
Yeah.
We lay down to go to sleep that night, and we're at least sheltered from the wind, more or less. But we did end up getting hit with quite a storm that evening that really kind of beat the tent down around us. Right. And we weren't even going to bother like getting up and trying to fix anything. We're just the hell with it. Like, that's fine.
That's the thing that really gets. It's the wind, isn't it? It's when it's great. Fair enough, it's cold, it's fantastic, but it's just that wind that comes with it. That is what that brings something that's down. It could be 10 to -10. That brings it down to like -30 sort of thing.
Yeah,
Doesn't it?
yeah, definitely. So the next morning, this tent looked. This is now day 3. The poor tent looked like just a heap on the ice there, and we decided to go back to the river. This time, bringing a more modern kind of a geodesic dome tent that I'm sure everyone has seen before. A bunch of food, more provisions. We make the hike back to the river, and the problem was with this style of tent. For anyone who's unfamiliar, the structure is supported with long fiberglass poles that are collapsible, and there's like a bungee cord that runs through the entire length, so it like helps pull the pieces together.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I've been somewhere before. Yeah,
Pull those apart at 40 below. That bungee cord doesn't. It just sags.
it's not gonna. It's not gonna bungee anymore.
All of its elasticity. So now we have to take our gloves off and open a pocket knife and cut each one of these out. And it sounds so trivial but there were like, I think, whatever, 50 or 56 of them that you have to, because there's 8 sections, and so that you're cutting these things out, and you can do maybe 3, and then you've got to put your gloves back on because your fingers just don't work in those temperatures. So that took forever. And by the time we finally got this thing set up, I remember seeing Scott's face as he was climbing into this tent. He turned around and looked at me for asking a question or something. And I thought, my God, like, he looked horrible. Like that, he's blue and he's gone. And then I thought, well, I must look the exact same. Like, this is a mess, So we climb in. We now have a backpacking Coleman 1-burner stove and white gas. And while you shouldn't necessarily fire one of these up in a tent,
Nope.
We thought, the hell with it. Like, so long as we die warm, we'll be fine with it. I have no worries breaking these rules. The second we lit that stove, the entire tent almost inflated like a hot air balloon. It just filled with hot air, and it was the most incredible feeling, as you might imagine. Like, just be finally, like, you could start removing all this heavy gear.
Yeah, it's got makeshift sauna and -30, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it really was amazing how well this worked. And immediately we just began boiling water for, melting snow, and we drank probably a gallon of water, right out of the bat, and just ate a ton of food that night. And we opened the maps before going to bed and just kind of looked at everything to kind of see if we could figure out where we were. And we had thought that we were downstream from the cabin's location. So the following morning, day 4 now, we both get up, and the first thing I hear is Scott calls my name, and I look over. He's holding his foot up, and his entire foot is black. It's still yeah. And again, I mentioned earlier, he was saying that his feet didn't hurt. Well, he never took his mucklucks off, and just because his feet weren't bothering him.
Yeah.
And the problem is he built up so much perspiration throughout because of the hike, and he left those on overnight. He was essentially sleeping with like frozen socks on your feet, right?
Jesus.
Big blocks of ice on your feet. And the problem is now a 2-man team is cut down to a 1-man team because he cannot. His foot at this point is still manageable. He can still, in other words, the frostbite wasn't severe enough that it would later need an amputation. However, if he does more damage to it, then he's in big trouble.
Yeah.
And doing more damage to it in that environment is really easy to do. So I made we talked about it, of course, and we were both pissed off because it's like, everything is going wrong. And we'd planned for this trip, by the way, for 2 years prior.
Wow.
The owner of the cabin, who is a kind of a world-renowned expert in wilderness medicine. He's got a bunch of books and things like that out. I mean, he trained us medically before going, and like we had all of the necessary skills, despite how this whole thing sounds. So I go back to the lake. I get the medical kit. I get additional supplies because I know he's probably going to need them, and I bring him back. So we couldn't really search for the cabin. The next day, which is now day 5, I got up early and I started hiking upstream because, again, I thought we thought we were downstream. And I get up maybe about a mile upstream, and I noticed this spot where there are these huge trees. Most of the trees up there, because of the environment, are really stunted. They're small. And I thought, I'm going to climb this tree and see if I can see anything.
Why is it doesn't matter where you are, every man needs to climb a tree.
Oh,
I think it's going to make it, doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in the world. I'm going to climb that fucking tree over there.
Yeah, I see a big tree. It's like, hell yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So, no, the problem is like, it's a normal thing to do with any other species of tree. And it's a normal thing to do in normal temperatures. But in that cold, climbing a spruce tree, first off, spruce trees are really scraggly. The limbs on a spruce tree do not get very big. So, and they're prone to just snapping, especially in those cold temps. And I've got all this winter shit on, right? I mean, I look like a Michelin man. And it's extremely dangerous. Like if I hurt myself, we're really going to be,
you guys, trouble. You're screwed.
But I'm like, the hell with it. This is what we got to do. So I climb this tree and I look and I don't see any sign of anything man-made, but I do spot this small lake that was just maybe another quarter mile upstream. And I thought, no one ever mentioned anything about a lake before. And I thought, if I could find this lake on the map, then surely we'll know exactly where we are.
Yeah.
But I was worried because it was really tiny. I didn't know if our maps had enough detail to have that on there. And so I went back to the tent. I told Scott, of course, yeah, no luck, but I think I've got a clue. And so we looked at the maps, and sure enough, there on the map is this little tiny speck, and I'm like, holy shit, that's the lake. And so we're upstream, not downstream. And that following morning, funny story. So that night, I'm in the tent. I'm sorry, this is the first night that we were in that tent. I forgot to mention this. And we drank all this water, ate all this food, and I'm in my sleeping bag, and I'm finally getting like a good night rest. And I wake up in the middle of the night. I've got to go to the bathroom. Normally in those tents, you'd have a designated kind of a bottle or something that you could use, so you don't have to go outside.
Go outside, yeah.
But we didn't have one, and I'm certainly not going to ruin one of our good ones, though. So I'm like, well, I'll just jump out and I'll take care of business outside. And so you've kind of got to psych yourself up when you're in your sleeping bag because you're warm, right? And when you jump out, you're going to be freezing your ass off. And so I kind of psych myself up. I jump out of my sleeping bag. I grab the zipper of the tent, and I go to pull it open, and it is welded shut with a bead of ice, welded shut. Because you're breathing in this tent and all of this condensation, it's ice. And I'm pulling on this. I can't get this. I'm like, maybe if I use a lighter. Well, now I'm almost hypothermic, just within a matter of minutes, I'm freezing.
So quick.
So I finally end up getting this thing open and taking care of business. But I almost died of hypothermia just trying to, answer nature's call. So
it's like when you walk outside, it's just like, I immediately regret this decision.
No, because the relief of having to go that bad, and then it was like, yeah, totally worth it. Totally worth it. Yeah. So anyway, that following morning, I awakened and started hiking downstream.
Right.
And I went about a mile, and I'm constantly looking, scanning the trees to see if I could see anything unnatural, anything that looked man-made. And there was one spot that I came to where about 40 yards into the trees and about 15 feet off the ground, there was a level line of snow, just level. And I thought, well, that sure as hell isn't. There's nothing level, straight and level in nature, right? I mean,
What is that? Yeah.
Crooked and all kinds of things. So I'm like, well, I definitely need to check this out. So I hike into the trees. And as I'm hiking up, I see peeking under the eave of this roof, I see this wall of logs. And I mean, this thing was so buried in the snow.
Jesus.
Like it could have been so easy to just walk right past it and not even know it was there. And I walked up to, I had to kind of touch the wall to make sure I wasn't tripping, so yeah. And I go into the cabin very cautiously, because just given how everything had gone, everywhere you go up there, you're constantly carrying a rifle, because I don't think they had bear spray at that point in time.
Right.
But you're constantly carrying a rifle, because there's, you're just outside of the polar bear capital of the world. And then there's loads of black bears and wolves and all kinds of creatures that can potentially do harm, I guess, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, given how our luck is going, if I'm going to kick open this door and there's going to be a bear or something in there that's
a chiller.
And so I opened the door, but luckily there was nothing. And I had this really powerful moment, because this whole idea of living in a cabin like this, my whole life up to this point had been wrapped around the outdoors. And this was something I dreamt of. I dreamt of it so much that I wrote a story about it when I was in, I think, the 8th grade or something like that, about running away and living in a log cabin in Canada. Like, it was that specific. And so I came to this realization as I'm standing in this place, like, holy shit, like, here I am, like, this happened, this manifested, like, this is the craziest thing in the world. And so I had a little kind of my own little celebratory moment there, and went back to the tent. And by now it's starting to get dark already. And Scott could hear me approaching, and he called out. He said, "Hey, did you find it?" And I could hardly catch my breath. In fact, I was very excited to tell him, so I was kind of trotting back, which was just stupid, because you're sucking in this ice cold air. So I was very much winded, and by the time I opened up the tent door, I said, "Yeah, I found it," And by that point, we'd become so comfortable with the system that we created there that we're like, well, there's no sense in trying to go there right now, so let's just stay another night in the tent, and then tomorrow we'll head over there. So yeah, so it was 6 days. That our 1 year adventure, that's how the first 6 days went of a year long crazy adventure. So it was
mental. Men's got a lot more days ahead of you. So you guys have found the cabin. I mean, a year away from everything, away from everyone, and life itself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. What did you guys do to keep yourselves entertained?
Well, I think one of the most important things, if you're going into a place like this, is you better have, you better be pretty comfortable with your own solitude, your own, you better be pretty, like, if you're a social butterfly, this might not be the place for you. You better have things to do, like, just whether it's building things, whether it's exploring places. Obviously, just the work alone that you have to do, especially in the winter, that takes up a good bit of time every day. Cutting firewood, getting water, all of those very basic things, that takes up a good chunk of time. So we, we spent the first 4 months there. And the owner of the cabin flew in to bring us more supplies.
Right.
He was in shock, of course, when we told him what had taken place. And being a physician, he was very curious to see what Scott's foot looked like.
Oh, of course,
And,
yes, still frostbitten, wasn't it? Yeah.
and the interesting thing was Scott made the decision. He stayed in the cabin for maybe the first week or so, just to make sure that he wasn't going to harm. He was worried about doing more damage to his foot. And then finally he said, "No, with this, like, I didn't come up here just to be if you just trapped in this box." So he started venturing out, and he could do that because we had the safety of the cabin.
Yeah.
But when Doc took a look at his foot, he said, "There's no way that you guys can stay." He's like, "We have to come out so that we can get this foot taken care of." He needed to have a skin graft on his. Now, all of the color had really returned to his foot, and it overall it looked pretty good, but his big toe was screwed. And
Well, is that what it is? Is like frostbite? Is that just like cold? It's like cold burn. Is that what it's kind of?
yeah, I mean, you're
transcribed to.
You're essentially freezing the tissue, freezing the tissue and the nerves, and so yeah, it's a burn essentially.
It's crazy.
His was pretty bad,
right?
So we ended up having to come out for 2 months. And I almost wrapped that into the fact that it was all part of that year, because we came right back in June. And of course, now Scott's really got to be careful to make sure that because he's got a fresh skin graft on there that had, we would have been back sooner, but we had to at least give it some time to take and to heal. And And so when we came back, now we're in the summer, and totally different world in the summer, just bustling and full of life and sounds. And one of the things that we do, I'm getting around to answering your question. One of the things that we decided to do, just because we had time and it sounded like a good idea, was to build another log cabin. So,
it's human nature, expand.
Yeah, right. It's what we do as humans, right? Like, let's eat up.
This is now
Nando's over here, and so we ended up we built this cabin in that same spot where I climbed that tree, because it was just the idyllic spot. And the beauty of this cabin, even though we hadn't considered this, it really became important because if over the course of time, maybe tensions start getting a little raw. Maybe you stay. There's a great saying by an outdoor author, his name Calvin Rutstrom, and he said, when he's talking about spending a long period of time in the wilderness with somebody else, he said, how do you tell someone that you hate their guts just by the way they hold their fork? And it can come down to some little thing like that, just annoys you. So the beauty of this other cabin was, if tensions got a little tight, you would say, I think I'm going to go spend time at that other. I think I'm going to spend time. We call it the Paradise Creek cabin. I think I'm going to go spend time up at Paradise Creek. And you'd go spend, 5 days up there. And then you get so bored with your own company and desperate to talk to somebody else that you'd come back and you'd be thrilled to see each other again. So it just really kind of worked out really well in that regard. So, yeah.
And you mentioned as well, you had to kind of forage, hunt for your own, like kind of meat and stuff like that. How did that go? I mean, you used a moose eagle, was that right?
Yeah. So, most of the game that we acquired, there was a lot of fish, obviously. And then it was a lot of small game. So like snowshoe hares, there's a type of grouse up there called a ptarmigan, which is delicious, by the way. We enjoyed that quite a bit. The big goal was a moose. And finally in late August, early September, we managed to shoot a moose for winter meat. And that was really a hell of an experience.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the amount of work that it takes to quarter and to butcher and to transport, like just the hide alone, for example, when it was wet, after it had been taken off of this animal, I'm guessing it probably weighed about 100 pounds. I mean, it was ridiculous. Everything in this, I'd never even seen a moose, or I'd seen one in the wild, but I'd certainly never been this close. And so everything on this animal is huge.
It's massive. They're big bastards, aren't they? I didn't realize how big they were until I saw it on on Discovery Channel. Obviously, I'd seen it. I'm like, holy shit!
Yeah, they're staggeringly huge and powerful as hell. And what's just so amazing is trying to imagine being one of those creatures with these giant antlers. How they navigate through that forest is beyond me, and they can do it. Like, you'll see one standing on the edge of a river, and then it will step into the trees, and the trees just kind of, and you don't waste it. They just kind of fold, pat by it, and it just disappears. It's amazing how those things survive up there. I'll never know.
How did you do it? Did you shoot it, or did you do like old school tactics by spearing it like a caveman?
We shot it with we had rifles, again for bear protection. I shot it with a rifle. And,
God, how many times you have to shoot that thing?
It was one shot to bring it down. And when we so one shot brought it down right on the bank of the river, just upstream from where so it was like the greatest blessing, because often you'll shoot one of those and it'll run off into the woods, and then you got to track it, and then I certainly don't want something suffering. So I was thrilled when that thing fell. When we got to it, though, it appeared to be dead, but then it sat up.
Oh, gee.
And so I shot it again, not really knowing, I don't want this thing suffering. And B, it's a massive animal. I want to be done with it. I want to dispatch as quickly as possible. So I shot it again, and there's those kind of nerves that kick in,
right?
When the death throes, I guess. And this thing's hind legs started kicking, and I thought it was going to kick itself into the river.
Oh, sure.
Really worried about that, because there'd be no way in how we could drag it out. And but luckily, it was over pretty quickly, and I feel like we showed as much respect to that animal as we could. Yeah.
I think it's just when something that big, when you shoot it once, I was half expecting it just to like kind of bounce off it and look at you, going,
like,
"What are you doing, man?
Come on.
Yeah, come at me, bro."
Yeah,
exactly.
No, he went down, and our first meal that night was we custom cut a piece of meat that fit our largest pan, and we just gorged on this, because we hadn't up to that point, we'd been there since June. It's now September. We hadn't had fresh meat, and so we definitely gorged on moose meat. And just a pro tip for anyone out there, if you find yourself in this position, moose meat is extremely high in protein and will give you the most horrendous gas that you do. I mean, the gas coming from it was so bad and just funky smelling. It was awful. But we didn't care. We had fresh meat, so we were.
Nobody's gonna walk in. You know what I mean? And just like,
it's not gonna be impolite.
Yeah, it's like walking into a wall of smell as soon as you open the cabin door.
Jesus, like a veil.
See, you did the year. You've coming up to the year sort of thing. I mean, what was it like leaving after spending all that time there? Yeah, you had a little gap in between. But I mean, then you had a long time thereafter, didn't you? You were there for the longest time. I mean, what was it like leaving?
Leaving is this is I've since learned, because after doing this, I just became fascinated with similar stories of like exploration or people who have gone on extended trips, and there is it's right when you get home, for example, there's tremendous fanfare. Everybody wants to see you. Everyone's excited. They all want to hear about your stories, but pretty soon that shit goes away. And anytime you say, when I was at the cabin, and people roll their eyes, it's like, okay, I've heard this before. And so you go through this weird, almost a depression where it's like, what do I do now? Like what, like what the hell? So, immediately coming out, there's the shock of it, right? The noise and the busyness. And, but then there's this long period of, after all of the kind of celebratory stuff, and it's difficult. Some of these stories that I've read of other people that have done this, it's a common theme. It's like almost something that you have to prepare yourself for. Because if you don't, it hits you, and you do find yourself getting depressed, kind of going to a dark place, because you miss it, yet you don't want to you don't want to relive it, but it's just weird. It's a very, like I said, either going in or coming out, you have to acclimatize. You have to almost get used to the norm again.
Get back, yeah.
And luckily for us too, luckily this was before the age of the internet, right? So, because I mean, hell, had we gone up now, we'd be on social media and blog and whatever the hell, doing live podcasts from the cabin. And I think it would take away from the experience. So luckily, so it was a slower time. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? Like it's
simpler time.
Yeah, much more. And so that was a good thing. I think it would be really hard to do this now. Just given how addicted we are and plugged in we are to all this everything, all this stuff.
Did you ever go back, or did you ever want to go back? Yeah, you did go back.
Scott and I both went back twice, and then I made a few other trips. Our last trip was in 2014.
Oh, so pretty recent then.
Yeah, and both cabins were burnt down in 2007 due to a forest fire that ripped through the area. So it was this really kind of tragic news to get. But I mean, that is what happens in that country.
Yeah.
So we went back in 2014 to just, I guess, as our own to get some closure, I guess, on it. So we flew upstream about 120 miles and canoed down to where the cabins were located.
Oh, wow.
And we're not 19 anymore. I was in my late 40s at the time.
Jeez.
So much from a physical standpoint, holy cow. This is really hard. And then you've got the emotional toll of it. It was a hard, difficult trip. I mean, the fire it just turned both those places into minerals. I mean, there was nothing left. Wow. It would have been impressive to see though, because, we stored a lot of ammunition, a lot of white gas and fuel, and all those things are stored at the guy. So I bet it was an impressive show. But
I bet that went up like a bitch. I bet that went, it's like a fireball going off.
I was hoping that the outhouse would burn like an eternal flame, like just like an oil well,
The amount of the methane that was in it, yeah,
exactly.
Brilliant.
But that wasn't the case.
So you've wrote a book. We mentioned it before, Paradise Creek, which kind of details it all, really, to be fair, the adventure of your first time there, which is, if you listen to this, guys, it's a great book to listen to. I mean, to read, sorry. And it's an impressive. Any sort of like kind of follow-ups from it, or is it?
I'll throw this disclaimer out. I wrote that book shortly after I got back from that experience. So I was like 20 something. So to anybody interested in reading, please keep that in mind. This is, it's not a literary masterpiece, but the story is very solid. And, and it does cover, the stories of the first week of hunting moose, of building a cabin, and then exploring the surrounding country. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. And I mean, what you've done all this sort of like kind of crazy adventure in your day. I mean, what are you doing now? Are you still planning trips away? Do you still yearn from dying of frostbite, or
So
what's the issue now?
here's the crazy thing, and here's, I guess, the crazy thing about life. Like, as I mentioned before, prior to doing this, my life revolved around the outdoors. If you would have asked me at the time, what are you going to do with your life? I would have said something with the outdoors for sure. Well, I came back and I realized like I still love the outdoors, of course, but I just wasn't as driven to be out there all the time.
Right.
I wasn't as, in fact, I moved to Colorado, to the Rocky Mountains, just to see if, like, maybe it's this place, because where I live in Northwest Indiana, it's very flat, kind of, it's not where you go for outdoor activities necessarily.
Yeah.
So I moved out west. Nope, still wasn't there. And now I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's almost like losing your religion. I didn't know what to do. And so, and this is right at the time the internet was really kind of starting to pick up. And of all things, I got involved in computers, and I began working in downtown Chicago at an advertising agency.
There you go.
And it was a complete polar reversal from what I had done previously. And so I found, my outdoor interest, those lasted for about 20 years. And then my computer interest lasted for about 20 years. And now it's like, I'm on the tail end of that whole computer thing. And it's like, so I started kind of building things with my hands, a lot of woodworking and leather craft, and just to kind of get back to my roots, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So
there we go. Fantastic. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for coming on and talking about your story. It's so good. And guys, pick up his book, man. You're going to love it. It's such a good, as you mentioned, it's such a good story, and it's great. Description will be below. But I say, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a treat.